Daryl Johnston.
Thank you very much, Scott, for that introduction. Very happy that I changed my speech. I have one that's about preparation and taking advantage of opportunity. And during the introduction, you would have taken half of my speech, so I'm glad that I switched. I'd like to start off by having everybody wish Palmer a Merry Christmas. So on three, I'd like everybody to join me in saying Merry Christmas to Palmer, because he said it to us. And so we don't burden him on the way out the door. Everybody on three. 1, 2, 3. Merry Christmas, Palmer. That's awesome that you came up. And a great thing that the March of Dimes is doing here. Now for some business work. First, I graduated high school with a 4.0, but I wasn't the valedictorian. There were 4 of us that graduated with a 4.0, so I was actually 1D. But I did get to sit in the audience with my friends and enjoy it. At that time, I was not accustomed to speaking, so I didn't have to give the big speech. And that was nice. And number 2 in the book here, it says that I rushed for back-to-back 100-yard games for the first time in my career. That should be back-to-back 100-yard seasons. Seasons. Not games. I wish I could claim games, but unfortunately it's just seasons. I've had a chance to be on championship teams on many different levels, going back to Pop Warner through high school. Our college football team went undefeated, and then when I got to the NFL, obviously 3 Super Bowl championships with the Dallas Cowboys. And to me, there's kind of one defining thing that existed between all those teams. And we like to call it a sense of family. I think you'll see football players a lot, or athletes a lot, talk about their team as being a family. And sometimes people don't understand what that means. And this weekend, Lovie Smith, we had an opportunity to talk to the Chicago Bears, and he's got such a great demeanor that when you talk to him, he inspires this quiet sense of confidence. And this is a team that has lost their starting quarterback. Brian Urlacher's been out of the lineup. Their big play safety on defense has been out. They have been decimated by injuries. They started their 4th quarterback, Chad Hutchinson, last weekend, and yet every time I see him, he is so positive. He is absolutely unflappable. And I asked him where he got this demeanor that he has. And he said, it's really simple. He goes, do you respect your father? And I said, absolutely. He goes, well, how would you talk to your father? I said, with respect, about everything that he's taught me. He said, well, that's what I'm trying to do here. When we talk about athletic teams being a family, he goes, you want to talk to the members of your team the same way you would talk to a member of your family. And you do that through respect. He goes, I set an agenda. I tell them what I want to do, what's expected from them, and then I hold them accountable to that. And if they don't perform, then I make a change. And to me, that kind of summed it up, because I've talked to Tony Siragusa about it a bunch. And he was part of the 2000 Ravens football team that went on and won a Super Bowl championship. And he talked about the same things that I experienced here in Dallas, that sense of family. But to put it in terms that's a little bit easier to understand, it's working together, the players and the coaches, with a common goal, but with respect for each other. And I think going back and forth, I don't think coaches ever give players enough credit for their contribution, and I don't think us as players give coaches enough credit for their contributions. As players on the Dallas Cowboys, I was very privileged to play with some of the best, if not the best, to ever play their positions. When you talk about Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Deion Sanders, a lot of these guys are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers. But there's something else that has to be in that mix. And you've got to have role players. You've got to have the person that doesn't have the ego. Somebody that's a good teammate, somebody that doesn't need their name called over the intercom in the stadium, somebody that doesn't need to see their name in headlines on Monday. And then you also have to have that other guy. And our coaches used to tell us, we need guys that have character, and then we need characters that can play. And we had some guys on our team that just brought a sense of levity to situations that really were instrumental. And if you go back to our Super Bowl teams of the early 90s, and someone was to ask me, who was the one person that you lost early on that was irreplaceable? And this may shock a lot of you, but it was Kevin Gogan. I thought that not only what he did for us on the field, but to create an environment 10 days into training camp at Austin, Texas, when the afternoon practice is 103, the morning practice is only 86, with about 80% humidity, so it's much cooler in the morning. To have somebody that could walk into your locker room at a point when the last thing you want to do is put your shoulder pads and your helmet on and walk out on that field in an attempt to get better. And he could walk into our locker room and just start telling jokes. And he started picking on people. And just his way of bringing a sense of relief. He got us to go back out onto the practice field with a smile on our face. And I really feel that those type of guys are absolutely irreplaceable. When you talk about the role players that we had, Bill Bates brought special teams to the forefront of the NFL. There was a spot created at the Pro Bowl because of Bill Bates. Nobody had done what he had done before. I remember when I came here in 1989, Bill Bates was not supposed to be on the team. You know, Jimmy Johnson in his first year, I think one of the things he really felt was going to be a difficult decision for him was to release Bill Bates. And when you've come into a situation where you have taken Tom Landry's job and there's all this transition going on, one of the last things you want to do is make another decision where you're taking a part of that history of that organization and asking him to leave. And Bill Bates, every year, Bill Bates was supposed to be cut from the Dallas Cowboys. But his performance and his passion and his desire to be a part of something he saw that was going to be special forced Jimmy to keep him on the roster. He was absolutely irreplaceable in what he did for our team. And what he did is he became a mentor to Kenny Gant. I mean, Kenny Gant basically assumed the role of Bill Bates as Bill Bates got on in years, and Kenny Gant was the up-and-coming guy. And that is a huge credit to Bill, because I think that success should be measured by your successor. And in my eyes, Bill Bates was instrumental in creating what Kenny Gant was going to become. The defense during those Super Bowl years, I don't think people realize this, but all the names on the offensive side of the ball that I mentioned, Troy and Michael, Emmitt Smith, we had so much notoriety on our side of the ball. And the highest we were ever ranked on one of our Super Bowl teams as an offense in the NFL was 4. We were the number 4 offense in '92. That year, our defense was number 1, and nobody talked about them. I don't think they received the credit that they deserved. And they were such good teammates, it didn't bother them, because they wanted to be part of what we were going to accomplish as a team, not as individuals, not as a group. That was the thing that really formed what our football team was about, that sense of family that I talked about. It wasn't important for them to get all that notoriety. When we played the Buffalo Bills, I really think that was one of the reasons that team went to 4 Super Bowls, but never won that final game. Because being somebody from Buffalo and having my parents back there and with the news services, through TV, through newspaper, to hear what was going on, they seemed to be a divided team, a team that didn't have that sense of family. And I think that's where we gained a tremendous advantage. But going back to '92, if you remember that game, it was the defense that really turned the tide for us in that football game. They scored 2 touchdowns, would have had 3 if Leon let just one more yard before he did that. It never fazed them. And here's the thing that really bothered me, and I actually talked to the coaches when we went to the last Super Bowl in Arizona. I said, you realize we have not introduced the defense at a Super Bowl. The first 2 times we went, we have not introduced them. You have to introduce the defense this time. And we talked about it as an offense. We've had our time. It's their opportunity. And what happened that year is we got into a rotation where you would introduce the team. So the first round of the playoffs that we played, the team was introduced. Okay, then we go to the championship game and they were introduced. And now we're going to go to the Super Bowl, so we're going to get introduced again. And we as a group, we'd had that. That is, to me, one of the most special moments of my life, is walking out that tunnel and taking the field for a chance to win a Super Bowl championship. And we've gotten to do that twice. We should have done it in '93, because I don't think any of us really thought that we'd have another chance. You know, we got to do it. They should have done it then. Since they haven't done it yet, you have to let them do it now. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't go back. You know, we've set this rotation. We become very superstitious as athletes. I mean, it's ridiculous. We wear the same socks on game day. We set our uniforms out the exact same way. We eat the same breakfast the day of the game. Nobody wanted to change that routine because in their mind, something bad would happen because this is the way we've put it in place. And that defense never got to be introduced before a Super Bowl, which to me is really an injustice because, as I talked about it, it is one of the most memorable moments of your life. And as a kid, that's one of the things that I remembered growing up with my dad when we watched the game, were the guys coming out of the tunnel. And your biggest fear as a player coming out of that tunnel is, please don't let me trip. Just get my knees up high, get my knees up high. I do not want to go down. The other part of our family is our coaches. And with the Dallas Cowboys, we had a tremendous group of coaches. And I think you've seen as they've gone on and pursued their individual goals in life to become head coaches, you've seen that they've had the merit to do that. Our original staff in 1992 has produced 4 other head coaches in the NFL. Dave Campo, Dave Wannstedt, Butch Davis, and Norv Turner. Now their careers as head coaches have not been as successful as their careers as coordinators. And sometimes, you know, I see that around the NFL. You can kind of sense the ingredients that it takes to be a head coach, and sometimes you can see whether those qualities are part of somebody's personality. And when you talk about those 4 gentlemen, I think Butch Davis is going to be an excellent college head football coach. He took the University of Miami and took that program from being down the middle to lower level of the top schools in the country to the #1 football school in the United States of America at the collegiate level. Again, he got it back to where Jimmy Johnson had it. Dave Wannstedt is puzzling to me because I always thought Dave was going to be very successful as a head coach. I think he just got into some situation where things didn't work out for him. Dave Campo, he had a situation where I don't think he had an opportunity to be successful here. It was during a time of transition for the Dallas Cowboys. It was a difficult time to come in as a head coach under difficult circumstances. And Norv Turner, surprised, similar to Dave Wannstedt, why he hasn't had more success as a head coach, because he was one of the best offensive coordinator I've ever been around. And just a great football mind. But there's that thing, and we talk about it with quarterbacks. You can go to a meeting on the weekends and sit down with one of these quarterbacks that's going to play, and you can know immediately whether he's going to be successful or not, because they have this thing. Obviously, they are talented physically. They have done things at the high school level, the collegiate level, that has given them the opportunity to become a professional quarterback in the NFL. But some of them don't have that thing. Troy Aikman, when you talk about guys that are blessed to have great physical talent, but then they have that work ethic, and then with Troy, he had that thing. And when you look at those head coaches, you wonder if that is the element that's missing, because as a head coach, there's so many other things that you have to do. But we were fortunate in Dallas to have them with us all together. And there's a theory in mathematics that the whole is equal to the sum of its parts. Sometimes I think that that's not true. I think here in Dallas, I think the whole was greater than the sum of its parts when we had that staff together, because sometimes there's a synergy that comes together when people are working together, that more comes out of it. And now let's take that family. Let's take all those coaches I talked about. Let's talk these players that I talked about and get everybody together and see what happens. And I think that that's why in the early 90s, as players, when guys would come in, everybody was so excited, because there was a tangible sense of what was being created. And I was just very fortunate to have been with the Dallas Cowboys at that time. I got drafted out of Syracuse, and we had guys that came out in my class. We had become a good team the year before, so we had some guys when I was a junior that had been in the NFL. And I looked around, and I had some guys that were with the Broncos and with the Chicago Bears and with the Philadelphia Eagles. And when I got to Dallas, they were 3-13, and we subsequently did worse than that and went 1-15. And you look around and you're like, boy, some of these guys, some of my teammates are going to have a chance to be in a Super Bowl. And there's absolutely no way that that's going to happen for me. As you sat at 1-15 in 1989, 1990, and wondered what your future was going to hold. And then all of a sudden, here come the pieces of the puzzle. You know, in 1990, we get Emmitt Smith. In 1991, Norv Turner becomes our offensive coordinator, and you start adding people, Kevin Smith, Darren Woodson, and then all of a sudden, you can see this thing start to build. You can see the confidence in everybody. Everybody is starting to see what Jimmy has saw since the day he walked into Valley Ranch and took over that team. And none of my friends from college ever had an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. I think only one guy with the Denver Broncos actually played in the game. But sitting back there in 1989 and thinking that I would be the person that not only had one, but ended up with 3 rings when all these guys were at teams that were in the playoffs that year. I think that shows you the strength that this team had, because we came from the bottom of the pack and just went past people who had been there for years, because that was before free agency. These teams were able to maintain their players. They could draft and build players. It was a different system back then. And for us to come from literally the depths of the bottom of the NFL and within 4 years be a perennial Super Bowl champion, I think speaks volumes of the energy that was created by this family, this group of players and this group of coaches who just seemed to mesh. And I think when Jerry thinks sometimes that I see a sense of we were 1-15 in 1989 and we were in the Super Bowl in 1992. And I think he needs to realize how unique that group was. And not just the players, because the players get the credit, but also the coaches. It was a very, very unique time, and I know myself personally, I just feel blessed to have been a part of that and had an opportunity to be with all those guys and to share in all the achievements that we did. Jimmy Johnson, the leader of the family, the head of the household. When he first got here, it was fun, and we went to training camp, and we went 3-1, and I think Jimmy thought it was going to be real easy in the NFL, and our opening game in New Orleans, we got beat 28-0. And Jimmy soon found out that the preseason really isn't really worth much in the NFL. We had to take a step back, reassess things. Our second go at it, we moved from Thousand Oaks, California to Austin, Texas, and Jimmy Johnson went back to his old ways from the University of Miami. And I think that he felt when he came here that he needed to change what had made him successful. He didn't know if people would buy into that as an NFL player, as a professional player. In college, you're younger. I think you can still be shaped. Your character can still be shaped. But when you get to the NFL, most guys are set in their ways. And I think that Jimmy felt that he didn't want to do anything to create distance between his players. So he decided to create that distance in 1990. We went to training camp in Austin, and we went 21 days straight without a day off. 2 days in the heat that I talked about. Bill Bates, our union rep, we had a meeting. We talked to Bill. We said, Bill, you do realize there is a rule that after 6 days there must be 1 day where we are not involved in football at all. We cannot go 7 days consecutive, and we're on 19 right now. You need to go talk to Coach. And I already mentioned Bill's situation as a player on the cusp. And Bill wasn't real excited about doing that, so we went in, we got some guys together that were older and sent them in as a committee, strength in numbers. And Jimmy's response was, until somebody comes down here and tells me I can't do this, we're going to continue to do this. And we went on to 21 days before he finally gave us a break. But during that time, you learn so much about the people you're going to be playing with. You know who can fight through it. You know who's going to give in when the going gets tough. I think the coaches learned a lot about us. And I've always felt that training camp was a necessary evil, something that you just had to go through to get to the regular season. But in some instances, it is invaluable. And in this instance, it was. That 21-day stretch was probably the foundation for what was to come over the next 3 years. And Jimmy was the one. Joe Avezzano has a great saying, but I think Jimmy personified it the way that he carried about his business. But Joe Avezzano would ask guys when we would start our special teams meeting, what is the greatest ability a player can have? And guys would raise their hand and talk about speed and strength and explosiveness. And Joe's response was accountability. was the most important ability a player could have. And Jimmy personified that by the way that he went from his day-to-day operations. And I think that today our society inappropriately defines what accountability should be, because we all feel that we need somebody else to hold us accountable, whether it's a parent or a boss or a coach, somebody that's in your group. Somebody needs to hold you accountable. I think everybody needs to hold themselves accountable, and that's kind of the aura that Jimmy created. I mean, we didn't really have to police our team. You know, guys knew what was necessary. Guys knew what was asked of them. It goes back to what Lovie Smith said. You know, you spell it out on day one, and you tell them what's expected. You teach them how to do this, and if they're doing it well, you compliment them and continue to build them. If they're not doing it well, you let them know what needs to be corrected, and if they can't get it, then you have to move on. And that's kind of what Jimmy had there for us. And I think it was invaluable for us at that time. I know a lot of people will talk about discipline, and the coaches that came after Jimmy Johnston, everybody says that there was a lack of discipline. I don't think that discipline ever goes away, but it was the accountability that Jimmy had there. The fact that we didn't even have to police ourselves, because you hear a lot of teams talk, and it is great to have veteran players that can step out and hold guys accountable. But when it's done by everybody by themselves, it's even better. And Darren Woodson, who is a phenomenal athlete, he's broken Bob Lilly's tackle record here with the Dallas Cowboys. He said, when I walked in my first day in the off-season program, and I saw you and Emmett and Troy and Michael and all the names that I had, you know, heard and watched on TV, and I saw how hard you guys worked at doing this, I knew right away what it was going to take from me if I was ever going to be a part of what you guys were creating. And I think leadership by example is one of the most important things you can have in a group when you're talking about trying to achieve success. Well, leaving the football world and going into the world of broadcasting, the transition for me, extremely difficult. And Scott can say that I made it look seamless, but it has been a growing process that continues to go on for me. Because when I played football, I was a role player. I was the guy that did the dirty work. You know, I didn't have to do anything. I had Troy and I had Emmett and I had Michael. You know, they were my guys. You know, I was just out there to do my things, to be a part of the Dallas Cowboys and to help them achieve the levels and the things that they had set as goals. As an analyst, I have now become the quarterback. And it's a very, very different role for me. And on top of that, the guys that I'm working with, Bob Stenner and Sandy Grossman, one of your speakers, Pat Summerall, they were the producer and director for John Madden and Pat Summerall for 20 years. So here I come, you know, green as you can be in this business, and walk into working with two people who basically redefine the way TV is done in covering football on TV, have done 18 Super Bowls between the two of them. And they tell me, well, this is an analyst-driven sport, so everything is on your shoulders. And I'm like, well, no. See, I was a fullback. You know, I don't do that. Well, you're going to have to learn how to do this then. And it has been difficult for me. It's my game plan. It's my game plan to execute. I formulate it with the guys on the weekend. And, you know, my name's attached to it. You know, we read the credits during the course of the game, but if you watch the game and there's things that you didn't like about it, the first people you're going to say is, you know, Dick Stockton and Daryl Johnston. My goodness, what are they doing on TV? It doesn't fall to anybody but us. You know, we have signed our name to that broadcast, and we have to accept the responsibility. That's when it started to click to me. Okay, this is an analyst-driven business. I have got to learn this new role with me. And become the leader of this group. I've got to be the quarterback. I mean, I thought back to the way Troy, you know, could step into the huddle, and when chaos was going, the respect that he immediately had. I mean, our huddle was nonsense on the field, because Nate Newton could block anybody that had stepped on the field, and we should be running the football, and Emmett would agree with him. I absolutely agree, Nate. We should be running the football. We don't need to be throwing it. And Michael's like, how can you not throw the football? I can beat anybody that's on this field. And everybody would be arguing. It was going back and forth, back and forth. And then Troy would step in and drop his head into the huddle, and you could hear a pin drop. So it was like, okay, you know, what did Troy do to command that respect when he walked into the huddle? And, you know, you just start thinking back to how he carried himself and how he communicated. And I think the big thing is, as a leader, you have to be very assertive in what you do. I think you have to reject the passivity that some people have. I mean, you've got to have a strong feeling about the message that you're trying to send. You have to obviously believe in what you think is important, but now you have to get that to everybody else. And over the next few years, I started to do that. And there have been a couple of instances where early on in my career as a broadcaster, I don't think I would have made decisions that I'm very, very happy with the way they turned out. We did a game in Washington one time, and the producer gets on the headset and he's like, we just got word that Champ Bailey just showed up 15 minutes before kickoff, and we got to keep an eye on this, and if something goes wrong, we need to bring this back up, and we can't let this get out in the papers the next day. We've got to have this story. We've got it. And he's just going crazy. And we're like, well, okay, are we sure it was Champ? It ended up not being in the papers the next day in Washington. It ended up not being Champ Bailey. That was 15 minutes late. And early in my career, because I don't think people understand how difficult it is to be in the NFL. People ask me, do you miss playing? I am so less stressed being out of the NFL than I have ever been in my entire life. I don't miss it. It's amazing. And I tell people all the time, when guys get to that point, you say, hey, when it's time to go, it's time to go. Come over to the dark side with us. It's nice over here. I mean, you're not going to believe how much more relaxed you are. And everybody that I see after that says the same thing. I mean, football is a difficult business. And it is a business. It's not a sport. It's not a game anymore. It is a business. And I don't miss it. And I know I love my time. I feel blessed to have been there, but I don't miss it. It's amazing. Another story we recently had this season, we're doing the Dallas-Baltimore game. I don't know if anybody saw this, but Musa Smith broke his leg. And we were going to commercial, and he got tackled from behind. It was one of those, I thought it was going to be a high ankle sprain when your foot gets tucked, but it was very awkward. And as we're going to commercial, you can see as he rolls over, you can see the leg. And it's broke. And it's broken very badly. And when we're during commercial, they show me a shot as they're putting the air cast on of the blood in his sock. He had a compound fracture of his lower leg. And I don't know how many of you saw Joe Theismann get hurt, but I had enough of that after the first time. I didn't need to see that 4 times. So they're coming back and they're like, here's some pictures of the injury. And I said, we don't need to see it. We showed it going to commercial break. If they saw it, I'm sorry that they saw it. If they didn't see it, good, because they're not going to see it again. And I just drew a line in the sand and said, we're definitely not showing that sock. We're definitely not going to show the one angle that you have where it's really obvious how severe this leg has been broken. I mean, he was air flighted from the stadium to the hospital. And I just don't think in TV that there's a reason to show these types of things. So again, having learned what I'd learned over the first 3 or 4 years, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. And I've started to get them to see things my way. Because, as I mentioned, these guys have worked with John Madden, who did a number of our games. And when I was a player, we had a 4th down against the Giants. And for some odd reason, they decided to hand me the ball. And I fumbled. And the number one instinct for a camera guy is to go and frame the head of the guy who's just made this huge blunder and let down the other 52 guys on his team. And I try to do my best with the language that I use. But in that instance, it becomes kind of a knee-jerk. And I said a very bad word that was framed in everybody's TV around the country. And you didn't even have to have the sound on. You knew exactly what I said. And my mom had to go to church and listen to everybody come up and criticize her son. So I have told Bob that Mike Holmgren, it was the same thing. See, now they're all coming back to me. Maybe there's more than 3 here. Mike Holmgren, I mean, here's a guy, everybody, you have a sense of what Mike Holmgren's about watching him on TV. But when you meet him, he's got a lot of Jimmy in him. I mean, he's an ornery guy. And we had a game, and he was on the sideline, and he had just, in the meetings the day before, he had told us that his daughter wants him to, if not retire, to take some time off because she's worried about his health. She's a nurse. And she's worried about his blood pressure, his weight, a lot of different things. And, he kind of kidded us around about that. And then they have a guy make a mistake, and then here comes Mike Holmgren down the sideline, and his face is red as the stripes on the flag. And I'm like, you can't show that. His daughter she's gonna have a heart attack seeing her father who's about to have a heart attack. I mean, certain things we have to remember what we're saying and not show these pictures. And it's helping me. You know, I'm starting to grow into it. But the big thing is being able to communicate this message to these guys, because in football, there's not a lot of communication that goes on. You're a bunch of guys who have grown up in an environment that's been the same since 1950. There is a code. I mean, we hear about the code of ethics and honor in some of the armed services, and I think sometimes we as football players aspire to be like these special forces guys and have this code of honor and different things. The way we handle business is totally different, and this fraternity that we won't let anybody come into. But when you get out into the real world, you can't function. I mean, you can't talk with people because you have done it the same way for year after year after year. And a lot of it is through aggression, through intimidation, instilling fear. I mean, that's basically how you get messages across when you're a football player, whether it's coach to player, player to player, player to trainer, you know. If you don't take my ankle right this time, I swear, yeah. It's unbelievable how we talk. We're horrible. And you get into the real world, and now I'm in this booth, and I get one of these instances where I've got something that I don't want to do, and what I'm hearing in my head and what is coming out of my mouth are two totally different things. And you've got to learn how to inspire people when you motivate them. Not motivate them through fear, but actually motivate them through inspiration. And that has been my big thing. And I think we're transitioning. Dick Stockton has been a great mentor to me. I think we're doing some things with our broadcasting that is very good. But starting out, it was very difficult for me because I just didn't know if I had the credibility to go against our group who had established such a great run early on in the NFL. The things that we learn in life, the things that we do, whether it's athletics or business, we're all trying to be successful. And I think the thing that people have to realize is nobody undertakes any task without in their mind the total thought of completing that and completing it successfully. The difference comes in loving what you do, in being able to go to work, looking forward to being there with the people you work with. I have a wife and two fantastic kids. I miss my family so much when I'm on the road. If this job ever gets to the point where I don't like it, I will be out of it so quick. And right now, that's not the case. We enjoy each other's company. We have fun. We're doing things. But as people talk about people being champions and doing things to be successful, if you're not having fun with it, if it's not something you enjoy, you will never do it in the best possible way that you can. So that is probably the most important thing I've learned. I had coaches and players who made my days with the Dallas Cowboys a pleasure to go to most of the time. August and some of those months were not a whole lot of fun, but overall it was fun. Our broadcast team makes it enjoyable to be away from my family for 3 days every week during the course of the season. And that is the number one thing, and I think that is why we were doing well. It's been an honor to speak to you this morning. I would like to thank the March of Dimes, Dr. Pepper, and Tom Thumb for making me a member of your family of champions. It's a tremendous honor to me. The names that have come before me, the people that have had an opportunity to speak to you, I'm very, very flattered to have been a part of that. It's been a great time, and I would like to echo the sentiments of Palmer. I'd like to wish everybody a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I hope everything goes well as you start your next year, and hopefully some of the things I've talked about will